goes in direction A or direction B.
In general, the field of psychiatry really doesn't allow for enough freedom of action on people's part, meaning an awful lot of problems, not all of them to be sure, but an awful lot of problems that get labeled as psychological problems really amount to people making rotten choices, and they ought to be instructed to make different ones. For example, let's say somebody is having a difficult time, notorious problem, completing a PhD thesis. So they'll run to a psychologist and will spend maybe months and years in therapy, sort of the Woody Allen problem, because they've got a big, complicated psychological neurosis. And really the problem is that they're lazy. And nobody has just said, you know, you're just making a series of rotten choices with how you're spending your time. And nobody has ever instructed you in certain fundamental virtues like self-discipline. And when you get up in the morning, you have to make an intelligent decision about how you're going to spend your time.
People who make up their mind about anything, whether they are given a prognosis of terminal cancer, whether they're given a prognosis of a certain health malady that's going to take a certain amount of time, the person who makes up their mind, and that is a great definition of the frontal lobe, when you make up your mind about something, you're overcoming the body, you're overcoming the enforcement from the environment, and you're overcoming time.
Oh, poopy.
If you don't see the traps, you have to go through the crap until you see the traps. Because if you don't see it, it's your only teaching machine. It's your only way for you to come to understand something new. So the universe brings these things to your door, and there is learning in them for you if you are willing to reflect upon them and think beyond the rigid mindset.
Can I? Wow. Borrow some toothpaste? Thanks.
When I talk about we disappearing, I don't mean that we physically disappear. What I mean is that we move out of the area of the brain that has to do with our personality, that has to do with our association to people, our association to places, our association to things and times and events. We don't exist in the associative centers in our brain that reaffirms our identity and reaffirms our personality.
We now have science to back up what our thoughts do and how they make our bodies weak. A lot of scientists who are actually studying this with behavioral kinesiology and other ways, showing that thoughts make your body weak. And thoughts pretty much create your reality. They create what you're going to think about yourself. If you're fat but you think you're wonderful, you'll be wonderful. But most women we're compared all the time with impossible images from Barbie to models. And so we think that our whole currency is how we look and how other people are going to perceive us. And we're always up against impossible standards.
What is relative to their own emotional addiction are movies and dramas and news and all the media that is so beautiful today, and providing people with experiences without having to be there. And yet, that does not define human greatness.
They're so hypnotized by their environment through the media, through television, through people living and creating ideals that everybody struggles to become, that no one can actually become in terms of physical appearance and definitions of beauty and valor that are all illusions, that most people surrender and live their life in mediocrity. And they may live that life, and the soul may never really, their desire may never really rise to the surface, so they may want to be something else. But if it does rise to the surface, and they ask themselves if there is something more, or why am I here? What is the purpose of life? Where am I going? What happens when I die? They start to ask those questions. They start to flirt and interact with the perception that they may be having a nervous breakdown. And in reality, what they're doing is that their old concepts of how they viewed their life in the world start to fall apart.
That's why very few people make this journey, because it's deeply unsettling. All of the molds that we have lived by have to be broken, and we have to liberate ourselves in this way. And sometimes there's an awkward period between the comfort that we knew before and the real state of comfort when we are the Lord of our being, which follows that interval of chaos. Most people, when they get into the chaos, give up hope and go back to the old false securities. They get to live a reasonable life and they get to die in some sort of peace, but they haven't advanced spiritually at all in that experiment that we call the life.
We're in completely new territory in our brain. And because we're in completely new territory, we're rewiring the brain, literally reconnecting to a new concept. Then ultimately, it changes us from the inside out. If I change my mind, will I change my choices? If I change my choices, will my life change? Why can't I change? What am I addicted to? What will I lose that I'm chemically attached to? And what person, place, thing, time, or event that I'm chemically attached to that I don't want to lose because I may have to experience the chemical withdrawal from that? Hence the human drama.
This life is but a page in an enormous book in which we will always be who we are, but always with the inherent needling of ambitious pursuit, a pursuit that takes us from the boring tedium of self-reflection, of self-hate, and to self-creation of new dreams. And we are ambitious gods.